on green-white or Bant Hardened Scales, Bant, remember, that's a splash with a 4 of Stubborn Denial in the main. He actually has a couple extra blue going on in the deck. He's playing 4 copies of Skyrider Elf. That's the flying creature with Converge. He also can power up his Woodland Wanderer with that blue mana.
Yeah, he also has 1 copy of Cinderglade in the deck, which you can find off of various fetch lands, and that's for the exact same reason.
All right, well, the match starts out. We have Osyp on the draw. First creature will still be his, though. It's Zergo Bellstrikers. We go back to Nicholas. His turn 2 play will be the aforementioned Skyrider Elf. So that, thanks to Yav Coast, is going to be a 2/2 flyer, playing green and blue for it. Now that creature is interesting. It's a scalable Skyreach Manta in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's that card, except you need to have blue and green up front, but green has flying, or blue has flying rather, and green has large creatures, so it makes sense as a blue-green design.
All right, we'll swing in from Osyp with the Zergo Bellstriker. We'll see kind of how Nicholas, whether he wants to trade and go big or whether he wants to race. He declined the trade here, actually, so it went down to 17. And it looks like he wants to go ahead and race in the air against Osyp's decks. That's definitely a statement against red.
Well, Fiorentino also has Dramoka's Command in hand, so it's important for him to get to untap with a creature. These green-white decks, sometimes they need to take a hit on the jaw to be able to untap with a creature in play, and then cards like Dramoka's Command become a lot more powerful.
Well, it looks like it'll be good on this board for sure. Osyp's second turn play was a copy of Dragon Fodder, so 3 creatures now on his side of the board. Nicholas fetching for a basic plains. We'll see whether or not Dramoka's Command comes out immediately. See, it looks like he has another Skyreach Elf, a Dramoka's Command, a Stubborn Denial in hand, so he may also just be able to go for a 3/3. We see here, the swing was for 2, put Osyp down to 18. No play just yet, so Nicholas holding up the pair of instants back on Osyp's turn.
Now, attacking here is a little bit risky for Fiorentino. If he hangs back on defense with Stubborn Denial and Dramoka's Command, it's hard for Osyp to make much inroads here unless he's willing to take a pretty big risk, or his hand is just loaded with a lot of wild slashes and fiery impulses. As it stands, the coast is clear for Osyp to just attack and cast whatever spells he thinks is appropriate.
Right, so if the elf was on blocks, for example, it could block a Goblin token, fight a Goblin token, have Stubborn Denial up, that'd be pretty safe. But with no blockers, Osyp's pretty much just going to swing here.
Yep.
See Dramoka's Command from Nicholas. Looks like it's going to put a counter on Elf. The Elf will fight down Zergo Bellstriker. Now Osyp's allowed to attack, so it's just 2 Goblins to swing in. Fiorentino down to 14. And he's going to go for a follow-up Hordeling Outburst, but this is a Stubborn Denial from Nicholas. That'll keep him off the turn 3 play. Osyp just going to get to have 2 Goblins at the end of the turn.
Great turn there for Fiorentino. Just swung the race very dramatically there. Able to answer one of Osyp's threats, leaving him with not a whole lot in play, and swallow up his whole turn there with Stubborn Denial. Yeah,
and that was so important for Nicholas because he didn't have Ferocious on the Stubborn Denial trigger, so that was just pay 1 extra for a non-creature spell. Now, fortunately, Osyp taps out for a 3-mana sorcery there, so the Stubborn Denial is live.
Yep. Just how you draw it up.
And that's actually the only... I mean, at 3 mana, I think that's the only spell that the Denial could have snagged there.
Yep.
But that it did. So despite the fact that he is down on life points right now, 12 to 18, Nicholas is ahead on the board. It's going to be Woodland Wanderer, and this guy is a big one. Green, white, and blue all paid for it. It's a 5/5 Vigilance Trample.
So there's a lot of criticisms you can make for Woodland Wanderer. It's just numbers, and it doesn't line up very well against most removal spells in the format. But against decks like Atarka Red, it's so big, and Vigilance and Trample is a great combination of keywords to be able to
it blocks.
Attack and still hang back on D.
Yeah, I mean, Vigilant, you get a Defender every time attacks. Trample's amazing against this board of X1s. We see Osyp's going to play Abbot of Carol Keep.
Although one of the strengths of Atarka Red is the ability to go wide in spots like this and still execute Become Immense plus Temur Battle Rage for some kills. So things are going well here for Fiorentino, and a lot of Lebedowicz's creatures are worth very little at this point. But the Hardened Scales deck is not out of the woods by any stretch.
Yeah, I mean, we do see this a lot with Atarka Red, whereas you mentioned, okay, the other creature deck gets 1 or 2 creatures in play, so now he's looking to go wide. But I mean, life totals are still very even here. And at 12, it doesn't take too many pump spells for Osyp to kind of chip shot his way to the last points of damage.
Exactly.
Fiery Impulse will go ahead and take care of Skyrider Elf. We do count instants in the yard. There is a Dragon Fodder and an Outburst on the Osyp side, so it'll be 3. That's enough to take care of the flyer. And Osyp replaced Zergo Bellstriker.
So Fiorentino this turn drew another copy of Stubborn Denial, which is pretty much perfect. Now he has a lot of protection against some sort of combo kill from Lebedowicz's side, and this game feels like that's what Osyp needs to do to win at this point, because just attacking with creatures with the life totals the way they are, it's not going to be enough to get the job done. Osyp is going to have to combo out.
All right, well, it's a Skyrider Elf again from Fiorentino. It's 3-3, thanks to that Prairie Stream that he has in play for the blue mana. He's leaving up blue off Yavimaya, though, for the Stubborn Denial, as you mentioned. And now that he has Woodland Wander, that is ferocious. This is just going to negate for 1. So you're right, so any sort of Become Immense, Teamer Battle Rage, Atarka's Command, what have you, those sort of late game closing cards from Osyp, he's going to need 2 copies, 1 to get around the counter spell.
And since it has to most likely involve Become Immense, and Fiorentino has a Stubborn Denial, now Lebedowicz needs 2 copies of Become Immense, and it's hard to cast 2. First one's very easy to cast, second one a lot more challenging.
Can he get there maybe with something like an Atarka's Command if he gets enough creatures out here?
Well, it is worth a lot of damage. It's 3 up front, plus 1 for each unblocked, plus whatever the power is on the creature. So Atarka's Command is also potentially an out here.
Well, it looks like Osyp's going to go for a kill here, or a lot of damage. He's dashing Lightning Berserker, fetching right now. Now, the last card in Osyp's hand is Teamer Battle Rage. So he doesn't actually have the Atarka's Command. It's possible he's trying to pump one of these, either the Lightning Berserker, Double Strike rather, the Lightning Berserker, or the Abbot of Carol Keep. It is a lot of damage. It's actually not a lethal amount of damage here with Fiorentino at 12. That's even before the Stubborn Denial that Nicholas is sitting on.
I think Lebedowicz's plan here is to make some attacks here. There's a number of ways that Fiorentino can block, where either Osyp gets to get rid of the Skyrider Elf basically for free if that goes in front of a 3-power creature, or he can trade up against the Woodland Wanderer, which is worth a lot to Osyp too, but I think it's going to be hard for him to beat the Stubborn Denial in hand.
Wow, okay, so here's the swing with the team from Osyp, and this is a surprising block from Nicholas. So he put Woodland Wanderer on Lightning Berserker. Oh, actually, and the Skyrider Elf on Zergo Bellstriker. Now, one of Osyp's lands actually is a forest, so he can't just make Lightning Berserker a 5/1 and have it trade with the Wanderer.
Exactly. This is a pretty sharp block here because Teamer Battle Rage, there's nothing that good to be done with it. We get the spot here where Osyp is trying to trade up into the Woodland Wanderer, and Stubborn Denial is going to be very hard to beat.
Yeah, and actually it is a great block. I missed it at first that Osyp had the green mana. I was thinking, wow, no, Osyp will probably just trade up here. But because he couldn't, because of that forest, he had to use the Teamer Battle Rage. We now see Fiorentino gets to Stubborn Denial the Battle Rage, so Osyp's out of cards, and he'll deal 5 damage to Nicholas.
It's just lethal on the way back.
And then, yeah, with no cards in hand, Osyp's at 8. Nicholas has 8 power exactly in play. This should be pretty elementary. Just a swing of everything should take care of him. So, yeah, sharp block. Looks like going to play out a Hardened Scales, or a Servant of the Scale, rather.
It's a little insurance.
Sure, but here's the swing for 8. Osyp has no blockers, no cards. That one's easy. Game 1 is in the column for Fiorentino.
And the blue card is definitely putting in some work there. Skyrider Elf did some very good work, allowing Fiorentino to go on the aggressive. Helped out with Woodland Wanderer, and the Stubborn Denials there were both clutch.
All right. Well, you had mentioned before that Osyp has a pretty interesting sideboard. You said playing Paolo's List off the start, but a lot of good things going on. Now walk through what he can bring to the matchup.
He's got 4 copies of Roast. That's a pretty standard anti-Siege Rhino measure, but against a deck with Woodland Wanderer, threats like Mana Gorger, Hydra, I think that Roast will be coming in this matchup. 4 copies of Flamewake Phoenix. It did look like Fiorentino there has a little bit of action in the air. He does have his copies of Skyrider Elf, but that may come in here as well, especially with those being able to back up with more removal here. 2 copies of Fiery Impulse, 2 copies of Rending Volley, a little on the narrow side, but they are pretty efficient removal spells against a class of Fiorentino's threats. I don't think this is a matchup for Hooting Mandrills, as Fiorentino is able to fight on the ground very effectively.
Yeah, now, that was the interesting part. You said this isn't a matchup for Hooting Mandrills. Now, when I look at a 4/4 Trample with Delph, that's, to me, always feels like a main deck card. Now, he has 3 copies in the sideboard, so what are the matchups that are we would see Hooting Mandrills for.
I imagine he has 4 copies of Flamewake Phoenix and 3 copies of Hooting Mandrills for matchups where he wants to get a little bit away from the combo element of his deck. A lot of decks are vulnerable in the air, and some of the decks don't kill Flamewake Phoenix very reliably. Hooting Mandrills becomes kind of a replacement for Becomaments in spots where you don't want a lot of pump spells. And Hooting Mandrills pairs very well with Flamewake Phoenix because it has 4 power, so you can get your Phoenix back.
Yeah. Now, on the other side, when I look at the sideboard, I have to say I like what is going on Fiorentino's side. It looks very straightforward. 3 Silk Wraps, 3 Surge of Righteousness. Those all seem excellent for the matchup. Silk Wrap takes care of small creatures. Surge against a red deck, I could sign up for. He has other things, Valor Stance, Disdainful Stroke, Dispel, Evolutionary Leap, but this seems like he should have a great array of weapons for the Atarka Red matchup.
Yeah, I love Silk Wrap, Surge of Righteousness, and Dispel in this matchup. I'm curious how Fiorentino is going to sideboard because there's no cards you point to as clearly being inefficient. It's possible on the draw he gets away from cards like Hardened Scales and Dromoka's Command, cards that kind of require him to be on the front foot to be effective. Those 2 cards definitely have spots of being great in the matchup, but I think with Fiorentino on the draw, he kind of wants to become kind of a generic control deck. Kill some of Osyp stuffs, get the ground settled, and then take over the game with better threats.
Maybe cards like Mana Gorger Hydra, these late game pump, that late game scaling creature isn't really necessary in the matchup, as he would just rather have that size up front on some of his guys.
Yeah, that's another card you can point to, although Mana Gorger Hydra also has moments of being very powerful here. So it's tough to be on Fiorentino's side here sideboarding because he's got 8 very powerful cards to bring in and no obvious dead weight cards in his main deck, but I still like his spot very much.
All right, well, if you're just joining us, there's 9 rounds in the queue today here from Star City Games Standard Open in Philadelphia. Myself, Matthias Hunt, along with Patrick Sullivan, will be bringing you coverage of all 9 of them. You can also follow us, however, on YouTube this weekend. We have a lot of our channel, SCG Live, where we do things outside of the Open Series, such as our Versus Series videos, premium archives. We have archives of this event and previous events will go up on YouTube. We also do unboxings and so much more. You can find that on youtube.com/StarCityGames.
It is free to subscribe. And once you're a subscriber, you will be notified when new content is uploaded to the page. And new content's being uploaded to the page very regularly every week. Upload the archives from the last Open Series and then a lot of content from the website as well.
All right, so back to the match. The interesting part which we saw out of Fiorentino's deck was Skyrider Elf. He played one on turn 2 that game, was able to Dromoka's Command it, played another one on turn 3. We haven't seen too much of that card, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on it, I guess, in general and in the banned Hardened Scales deck.
Well, a lot of decks are trying to attack in the air now. You see these copies of Flamewake Phoenix in Lebedowicz's deck, and Wingmate Rock is one of the marquee threats for a variety of mid-range matchups. I think it has something to do with Den Protector, Deathmist Raptor, and Hangerback Walker to a lesser degree, making attacking on the ground very challenging in a variety of matchups. So people are trying to diversify a little bit, have some flyers in their deck. Also, you have an interest in being able to block Mantis Rider. It's not like Fiorentino is bringing a whole lot of removal spells in his deck, at least game 1. So having a flyer that can block Mantis Rider and trade on curve. It's not hard for Fiorentino to cast it as a 3/3 flyer on the 3rd turn. Could help a little bit in those matchups as well.
Yeah, it is. In a lot of ways, it is just that Mantis Rider without haste or vigilance in the deck. But because it has this extra dimension, I guess, as a 2/2 flyer for 2, we did see it be very effective as that last game.
And with the fetch land, battle land combination in Fiorentino's deck, he does have a copy of Cinderglade that he can get off Wooded Foothills and off of Windswept Heath. So he can cast as a 4/4 flyer on turn 4 if things break the right way. If he opens up on 2 basic lands, he gets white mana somehow off of a random dual land, and then he can fetch for the Cinderglade. Now you have a 4/4 flyer, which is very big for 4 mana, and now your Stubborn Denials are also turned on.
Yeah, and 4/4 seems to be that really relevant size for flyer. You're talking about how Mantis Rider and Wingmate Rock are the premier cards in the sky. Well, those are a 3/3 into 3/4. So 4/4 flyer, okay, so his deck can't make it into a 5/5. There's no source of black. But 4/4 seems to be really that critical mass number of where it's going to rule these creature battles.
Yep, there's probably enough little things going on with Skyrider Elf in this deck where it justifies its slot.
Yeah, it has 1/1 counters. I mean, I guess I can get to a 5/5 with Hardened Scales.
Yes.
Yeah, when we think about Servant to the Scale, Avatar of the Resolute, there's a lot of there's a lot of synergy with it here.
And with Dromoka's Command, you also just want to be casting a creature on turn 2 so you can Dromoka's Command as early as possible.
Right. We did see that last game, had us a turn 2, and that allowed him to Dromoka's Command plus Stubborn Denial on turn 3.
So I was talking to Osyp yesterday as we get the second game here started. He was really worried about what his post-sideboard games were going to look like in basically every matchup. He was banking on winning a lot of game ones and winning a lot of game threes on the play. So he's already up against the wall here as he has lost game one, and Fiorentino's got the type of sideboard that Osyp feared. A lot of interaction and all of it cheap.
All right, well, it's going to be Zergo Bellstriker again on turn one for Osyp, but this time he's on the play, so that guy should be good for more damage than he was previously. Last time he got in 2 with a Zergo before it was taken down by a Dromoka's command. Nicholas's side looks like he's just going to cast a fetch land for a Canopy Vista. Is there a reason that he needs to do that main phase?
No. Just save everyone some time, I suppose.
Sure. Monastery Sphere will join Zergo for attack of 3 on turn 2 from Osyp. I mean, I'll admit I do that on Magic Online all the time.
Yeah.
So then I can F6.
Exactly. And Fiorentino gets the IRL F6 basically.
Yeah. Yep. But my lands are tapped. It does look like a double copy of Hardened Scales in his hand, which is a lot of setup for him to not impact the board on turn 2 here. I'm interested to see if he can find a window to get those into play. He had the option of getting a basic forest or playing a basic forest last turn to set up Hardened Scales, but he didn't do that. Looks like he's going to play a second land, and this to me smells like a Surge of Righteousness that he has set up this turn, and we'll see if it's that. Osyp playing Abbot of Carol Keep flips a Zergo land, and he doesn't even take... Yeah, can't do it because it's legendary, but he gets to play a third land and play another Monastery Sphere. Here's Surge of Righteousness to take care of Zergo, but Osyp gets in for 2, but Nicholas gains 2.
And for as commanding as it looked like Fiorentino had game one, with the right mixture of spells, or if Fiorentino's short one of those 2 stubborn denials, that's a winnable game for Osyp. And you see the power of this deck when it's on the play here. It's taking a while for Fiorentino to be able to interact. Even a turn 2 removal spell is not really keeping up with Osyp's board.
On Fiorentino's side, he played Hardened Scales and Avatar of the Resolute. Now, he took a pain to play that Hardened Scales, and it hasn't really come to fruition yet. You know, there was no counters for the Avatar to get. On Osyp's side, he'll play his second Abbot, get a Mountain, Fiery Impulse away the Avatar, and here comes the team. They all prowessed, so that's 7. Nicholas down to 8, and he is he is looking like he may be dead next turn here. He does not actually have a sweeper in the deck. And his draw, not shabby. Had Surge of Righteousness, Avatar of the Resolute, 2 copies of his namesake Hardened Scales. A card that can do a lot of work, but it does not seem like he's had time for that to do anything.
It's also just not that much help in games where Osyp is going wide. In games where Osyp has one threat, Hardened Scales can do a lot to ensure that Fiorentino's threat is the bigger and better one. But in spots like this where Osyp has 4 creatures in play to nothing, even if Fiorentino had something that triggered the Hardened Scales, it's not worth a whole lot.
Yeah. Now, I mean, to be fair, this kind of draw from Osyp, it's the draw that I'd say I'm very scared of out of a Tarka Red. A turn 1 Zergo, 2 Swift Spears, 2 Abbots. This is a great start for Osyp.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to go wide, and it didn't really cost him too many cards to do that. You saw that card like Fiery Impulse do so much work last turn. It is basically a Searing Blaze for 1 mana. Did 3 damage to a creature, pumped Osyp's creatures by 3. Well, here's Woodland Wander out of Nicholas. If Osyp has a spell, this is a lethal. He has a lethal attack. Any spell will do it. Lightning Berserker may do it as well. That's going to be dashed in.
Yeah, this is lethal. He has to block the Berserker, and he's got 6 points left over.
That'll do it. Yep, this time there's no green mana in play. That Berserker is the most damage. And just for good measure, Osyp will show the Fiery Impulse. So he had the spell as well. Osyp evens things up 1 game apiece. And he killed him with room to spare there.
You can see Osyp's body language there at the end there with Fiorentino trying to do the math and Osyp kind of giving him those, dude, you're dead by 4 or 5 points.
I like his play. Where we saw that Osyp could just let damage happen, but he's like, to speed things up along, he's like, don't even bother doing the math here. Here, I'll just make it easy. I'll cast this.
Trust me, it's a lot.
It's
you're dead by a lot.
So a quick game 2 from Lebedowicz. He evens things up at 1 game apiece. We'll go to a decider. You mentioned Osyp concerned about some of those post-board games. When he's on the play, I'm saying that looked really good on his side. Obviously, on the draw, things can be tougher.
I think The issue that I have with the Tarka Red in the format right now, and I think it's still a good deck, and we're going to see plenty of it over the course of the weekend. I think in post-board games where your opponent has a reasonable mixture of good sideboard cards against you, Dispels, Duresses, Surge of Righteousness, Russian Cleric, whatever, the typical anti-Tarka Red cards, if they're on the play and have Hangerback Walker and then have any sort of draw involving a sideboard card, I think it's very hard for a Tarka Red to win. We haven't seen Hangerback Walker out of Fiorentino's deck. His deck's obviously built around maximizing that card. He's got Hardened Scales and Avatar of the Resolute, so he's really trying to make this card happen. But even without that kind of setup, I think that on the draw, beating Hangerback Walker plus anything else is very challenging for a Tarka Red.
Yeah, now when we look at, okay, so a Tarka Red last season, I mean, was one of the top decks of the format before rotation. And when I looked at Osip's draw last game, 2 Swift Spears, 2 Abbots, that reminded me of last season's Tarka Red. He's playing all, it's this red aggro deck that's mono good cards, and it just came screaming out of the gates there. Now, I want to back up for a second because you're saying that this deck is weaker post board. Now, the difference that a Tarka Red has now is that, okay, we're playing cards like Titan Strength, Teamer Battle Rage, Become Immense. We haven't seen any of these games, but is that what makes it weaker post board, that it has this kind of synergy-based game plan as opposed, previously those cards were just more good red things?
It does get worse in the sideboard games because your opponent's just going to have more copies like Duress and Dispel, cheap removal spells like Murderous Cut to break it up. But I think that Lebedowicz does need to keep some of that stuff going on in his deck because it's very hard for Lebedowicz to win without those cards once Fiorentino locks up the board. And his deck's pretty well equipped to do that. Now, on 5 cards, it's going to be a challenge, but his deck is still very good at gumming up the ground.
Yeah, I mean, so 5 cards is going to make it harder. He certainly, I don't think he wants to see anything like Hardened Scales anymore. It's a powerful effect, but he probably can't afford to lose a card anymore for something like that. They just need to be creatures and lands.
Yeah, it's also a card that I would have just cut from Fiorentino's deck in the first place, I believe. And with Fiorentino going back to his sideboard, he drew 2 copies of Hardened Scales that game that didn't do anything. You got to wonder if those cards are not on the bench. And now,
yeah, going down to 4. I mean, it's unfortunate here. All right, so it may be a walkover for Osyp at this point, but were it not, you can see sometimes, especially against a deck like a Tarka Red, even on a 4-card hand, if you have a certain card or maybe pair of cards that are somewhat trumps in the matchup, you can still win on a 4-card hand. What's he looking for?
2 lands, Hangerback Walker, Surge of Righteousness. That's a hand that can beat a weak 7-card hand from Lebedowicz.
Yeah. Would even something like just 2 Hangerbacks work?
Yeah. That card is worth so many cards and so much time out of Lebedowicz's deck that on a 4-card hand, it's still not a lock.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Hangerback, I'm not sure if he has another card that can do that kind of work.
That is true. And now, unfortunately for him, a lot of his 1-for-1 removal spells, the good stuff like Silk Wrap, it's not nearly as good because he's just missing the critical mass of cards. But Hangerback Walker still gives him a shot.
Yeah, if he starts trading 1-for-1 with Osyp, because he's starting down 4 cards, remember 3 off the mulligans and 1 off Osyp being on the draw, I think Osyp will actually turn into the control deck here. And now it looks like his turn 1 is a Hardened Scales. We're now into the match. That feels like a mull to 3 almost.
That depends if it's backed up by Hangerback Walker. It looks like
and it's not. No.
Listen, Lebedowicz definitely breathed a sigh of relief there. If Fiorentino has Hangerback Walker, it's a game.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a 2-2 immediately. It would have been pumped to a 4-4. This could have been a problem.
Yes. So I was saying, do not assume this is a lock for Lebedowicz because Fiorentino is on 4 cards. It is not.
All right, well, Osyp had no turn 2 play, but he did have the turn 1 Zergo Bellstriker again. It swung in to put Nicholas down to 17. Nicholas took 1 to play Hardened Scales. I don't know if Nicholas's draw is going to come together here. His turn 3 was just passing. He didn't actually have the 3rd land. Looks like he has Surge of Righteousness in his hand. That's not castable at the moment. I think Dromoka's Command and Surge are 2 of his cards. So unless he hits a Plains, I don't think he's playing the game. And nonetheless, he needs a creature regardless.
Yeah, it needs to be, if he draws a white source of mana or a Hangerback Walker, he's still playing.
But it almost needs to be this turn. Now, there's some reprieve. Osyp seems to be heavy on lands, low on threats here. You see in his hand, he's got Fiery Impulse. It looks like at least 2 more mountains. A copy of Roast. But Zergo going to work, and Osyp just playing out extra lands. We go to Fiorentino's side. Drew a land for the turn. This is a Wooded Foothills. It can get white, but not until the next turn.
Yeah, if the Yavimaya Coast was a basic, then he would be able to fetch for a white source of mana that came to play untapped. As it stands, he's probably going to have to go Canopy Vista at the end of the turn and then cast something the following turn.
Right, Canopy Vista, that's the white source he can fetch off that. On Osyp's side, just thinning out his deck, fetches for a copy of Cinderglade. Now, Zergo Bellstriker has done 6 points of damage and looks to get in for another 2, putting Fiorentino down to 11 next turn.
So this is a small criticism that I have here. If Lebedowicz does not need double green, maybe he does, but if he doesn't need double green, I just prefer to fetch for mountains in this spot because it means your Windswept Heath can get red mana, and you want as much red mana as possible because you have Lightning Berserker in the deck.
Right, so you're planning, there's actually only 2 Cinderglades in Atarka Red.
Right.
So when there's 2 Windswept Heaths, so now they only can get Forest.
It's a very small thing, and if Osyp is feeling like he may need to cast Atarka's Command and become immense in the same turn, totally fine for him to get the second green source of mana. But if he was just doing it kind of as a reflex thinning of the deck.
Hey, it's free, why not get my duels?
Right, I have a preference there to just go get the mountain there so your Windswept Heaths can always get red mana.
Yeah, heads up play there. Also, of note, because there's only 1 Forest and 2 Windswept Heaths remaining in the deck, there's a chance that he blanks his own Windswept Heaths.
Yes. Small considerations, but
yeah.
And again, if Lebedowicz feels like he needs double green potentially, then
yeah,
it's fine.
There are reasons to need 2 forests. Heads up. So Osyp added a Monastery Swiftspear to the board, so now it joins Zergo. Fiorentino down to 9. He'll play a second copy of Hardened Scales and pass the turn. When he gets a creature, it's going to be large, but that's seeming like it's too far away. You see 2 Dromoka's Commands, a Surge of Righteousness.
Osyp might just hang back here. If he's flooding out, you know, Fiorentino is very likely to have that card in his hand.
Yeah.
And very sharp play from Lebedowicz. Does not attack. Understands that Fiorentino has Surge of Righteousness in his hand, most likely. It's very bad news for Osyp if he allows Fiorentino to kill one of Lebedowicz's few threats. So if a land-screwed Fiorentino wants to leave up 2 mana and not do anything, Osyp's fine, just letting the game look like this, taking some draw steps, trying to find some more threats.
And he did just that, and so he went over to Fiorentino's side. He drew Avatar of the Resolute, so now he has a creature, but because he didn't have a 4th land, Fiorentino didn't deploy the creature. He's actually just waiting because he feels a need to keep up something like Dromoka's Command or Surge. A 7th land for Lebedowicz.
And Osyp's hand is very heavy on removal. I believe it's 5 removal spells right now.
Yeah, Fiorentino's hand the same way. They just continue to trade back and forth. Can Fiorentino get that 4th creature or land? He can't, but he can get a Servant to the Scale thanks to 2 Hardened Scales. It's a 3/3. That's a start. And actually is out of roast territory already because of that copy of Dromoka's Command in Nicholas's hand. It would make it, thanks to 2 Hardened Scales, Dromoka's Command is 3 1/1 counters.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
And we may see Osyp, he'll have to use 2 kill spells. Here's Roast.
But he's sitting on so many removal spells. And with these 2 Swiftspears in play, if Fiorentino picks a big fight here, he might just die from all the prowess triggers.
And if that's what Osyp's counting on. So he played Swiftspear. He's going to Roast the Servant to the Scale. That represents 6 power right now just off that first trigger. If Fiorentino goes for Dromoka's Command here, which he's priced into, but he takes 1 damage off his own lands to try to Dromoka's Command. Now in Osyp Fiery Impulses, that pumps again. That's up to 8. And Osyp, now 10 power in play off his Swift Spears, and that will be a swing for lethal. And there you have it. Osyp Lebedowicz in 3 takes care of Nicholas Fiorentino. A game that actually went longer than I had suspected based on Nicholas's 4-card start. But in the end, Osyp with too many removal spells for Nicholas to make his way through.
And definitely a winnable 3rd game for Fiorentino there if he drew Hangerback Walker. Could have definitely won. Fortunately for Lebedowicz, Fiorentino didn't find